Acapulco, Mexico. This is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I've got a great first-time guest coming on from Guadalajara in Mexico. It's actually kind of interesting how he moved there. He's originally from Australia. It's Kurt Robinson. He actually, if you've been to the last few Anarchapulcos, he's been a rapper. He also has a great new show called Paradise Paradox, which I really like. We'll talk about that a bit later. But maybe we'll start off just showing his rap skills. That's pretty good. Here's him from the last Anarchapulco.
Wander through the hotel, pick up free Wi-Fi. Free your imagination, travel through your mind's eye. Make freedom so common that it seems boring. I forgot my clean underwear. I'm free balling. None of these phony laws you should believe in. Victimless crime spree, Derek J. Freeman. Free enterprise, drug dealing, you could be boss. And that reminds me, man, one more thing. Free Ross.
And as I mentioned, he's also got a great show that I really enjoy, so I wanted to have him on so more people knew about it. It's called Paradise Paradox, and I'll just play like a very short clip of it here so you get an idea of it.
One of the things that popped up a lot was people saying, if SegWit comes in, if segregated witness comes in, well, you just wait when segregated witness comes in. And I'd say, well, hang on. I think it's kind of starting the story in the middle there. Hang on a minute, champ. Because this is kind of like if I say, if I become a millionaire before I'm 25, well, there's a lot of steps that go into the process before that happens.
So as you can see, it's funny. Covers a lot of things like cryptocurrencies and liberty and life in Mexico as well. And we're going to get into all that here. But Kurt, before we get started, I got to ask you, how did you become an anarchist?
Great. Thanks, Jeff. I've been waiting for years to hear you ask me that question. So thanks so much for everything you do for the liberty movement. It's great stuff. So I guess becoming an anarchist for me, like a lot of people, it wasn't like a single flash moment, like a single moment of realization, like Satori or something like that. It was a series of events throughout my life that eventually led me to this conclusion. So I remember one of the first things was, like when I was 15, 16, I liked to smoke weed. And some of my friends didn't like smoking marijuana. They liked to drink alcohol. And they thought it was just fine and dandy that weed should be illegal and alcohol should be legal. And I could see this huge contradiction there because, for one thing, it's my body. I should be able to say what I do with my own body. And there's no real moral distinction between these two substances. There's nothing that really differentiates them from a moral perspective. And then years later, I guess, at that stage, I started calling myself a libertarian, but I only understood this kind of social element of liberty or personal liberty. Years later, I remember around 2010, 2011, I met my friend Bob Lunn. And he started talking to me about this crazy stuff, like this free man on the land type stuff, talking about how the idea that a statute requires your consent, like if the government tries to lock you up, then they need your consent, for certain crimes. And I thought that sounds weird and bizarre and very, very interesting because I'd never heard anything like that before. Now I don't fully buy into those ideas, but it's still very fascinating. So I became obsessed with it, and I started to research into it. And actually, some of the people that I listen to have been guests on your show, like Mark Stevens and Dean Clifford. Very, very interesting stuff. And I also remember I started reading about these maxims of law. And one of them, which is very important, which I think actually if anybody follows this to its logical conclusion, they will become an anarchist. The idea is we are all equal in the eyes of the law. And so, of course, if you think that through the whole way, you can see, well, taxmen can take things from people without their permission, and somehow they evade liability for that. I can't take something without anybody's permission. If I do that, I will, of course, be liable. Then the other thing was I started sending all these letters to government organizations, for example, the Australian Taxation Office. And I remember I wrote this letter to the commissioner and asking them all these questions saying, well, how do you know that this statute or this law applies to me? Where does the authority come from? And all these things. And I remember I actually got a response after about 6 months. You know, the bureaucracy pretty slow. They sent me this letter back from the Deputy Commissioner of the Australian Taxation Office, and it was actually very vague. So at no point did it actually say, these statutes do apply to you. We have the authority, and we have it because of these reasons. It never really said that. It gave me some examples of how other people had been prosecuted for it. And at the end of the letter, it had this thinly veiled threat, basically saying, well, you better pay your taxes and pay the money that's owed, which I realized was very strange because I didn't actually owe them any money by their own standards. So they weren't really investigating. They weren't really taking my question seriously. And so I had to wonder, okay, so these people claim to have all this authority and everything, but if I ask them what authority they have, they can't tell me. They can't tell me clearly that they have it, and they can't tell me why they have it. So if they can't answer, well, who the hell can, right? So then I remember I started, some video popped up on Facebook around that time. So that was Ron Paul's campaign for 2012. And somebody said, well, this politician seems very interesting. And I thought, politicians, you know, it's probably a joke. They probably just change the words around a little bit and make it seem like it's something new, but it isn't. Then I watched the video and I realized this guy is actually teaching people things. And that's something I had never seen a politician do before or since. So again, I became obsessed and I started watching all of these videos and I started to understand this economic liberty, how actually government regulation, a lot of the time, you know, maybe it has this small effect, this small good effect on the economy, but most of the good things that we have comes from people peacefully cooperating and working out their problems, negotiating, all of these good things. And so then I had all these three pieces, like I understood the personal liberty on a personal level, and I understood the economic liberty, and I even understood this law or philosophical level to some extent. And then I remember somebody sent me a video from back in the day from Stefan Molyneux, back when he was still cool, and talking about how taxation is theft and government is unfit to exist. And I said, yes, that's it. This has got to be it. This is the only way that these pieces all come together. So then I knew, you know, a stateless society has to be the moral way to go.
That's great. Yeah, it's kind of funny. A lot of the people out there who sort of the free man on the land sort of types, or people like yourself, you know, a few years ago, they're just trying to understand how these people own them and how they have the right to their property and how they can tell them what to do. And they still have this mindset of, oh, well, I'll ask them questions and I'll send them some letters and maybe they'll send me where it's written down somewhere where I did agree to this. Or if not, maybe there'll be some sort of reasonable excuse for how they're doing this. What those people unfortunately don't understand is we literally live in a prison. This is government. There's nothing nice about it. This is incredibly evil and nefarious, and any sort of dealing with them on a level of, oh, well, maybe I'll vote for somebody, or I'll talk to somebody, or I'll just be a good law-abiding tax citizen, and everything will be okay. Well, to an extent, it will be okay if you do every single thing they say and walk very carefully and pay them pretty much everything you've ever made. They might not kidnap you. They might not kill you. They still might, but they might not, because they actually want you to do that. So, you know, it's just sort of that understanding that a lot of people don't have yet of just how evil and nefarious it is, this system.
Yeah. So basically, you know, a lot of the free man on the land people believe that maybe they can send a letter and eventually they'll receive a plaque in the mail that says, now you are free, you are no longer a subject. But basically, if you want liberty, they're never going to put it on a plaque. You kind of have to take it.
Yeah, and the thing that a lot of us talk about is really taking it violently. I'm not sure that's the way. I'm open to the idea because this is how serious of a situation it is, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to work. I think because we need enough people to understand what we're talking about before anything even violent would happen. I really hope it doesn't go violent, but we need so many people to understand that. And by the time they understood it, there wouldn't really be a need for violence because everyone would just stop paying their taxes. When the police rolled in their neighborhoods, they'd be like, get out, or we will actually, force you out because you are on our private property. So in that sense, I guess there could be some violence involved, but it really doesn't have to be this whole revolution of like everyone storming the castle or storming the parliament and hanging everyone. Although that if they wanted to do that, like I'm not going to stop them. That's for sure. It's it's not crazy, but I really don't think that's the solution. What do you think is sort of the solution?
Yeah, well, I think violence, storming the palace or whatever, and stealing the king's crown. I don't think that's going to strategically. I don't think that's a very good idea. Though people could probably make a case that it's justified morally. I think strategically, the better way is just to change minds piece by piece. And I know you're familiar with the work of Sterling Lujan, and he's got some great ideas about how we can basically embrace our better nature and be kind to people, and how that helps us spread this great message.
Yeah, I know you're into things. I don't know how much you're into them, but I've seen you talk about them on your show, things like ayahuasca and all that. And so it appears you're quite open to the sort of conscious awakening sort of idea. And what do you think of the idea that government is almost just the result of a unconscious humanity? So we're, in many ways, I believe that we create our own reality on a mass scale, on like 7 billion people all creating their own reality. Is it possible that we actually, because we haven't awakened enough consciously, we actually created this situation?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what extent that's true, but I know it's probably true on some level. So yeah, when I interviewed Sterling Lujan, I asked him, could this response that we have, like sort of demanding violence from government, could it be a sort of, well, we didn't say mental illness, we said a stress response. Like if you're traumatized in your youth, then you react to it. And as long as we carry these traumas around with us, people are going to be demanding the violence. So if we can, I think it's a spiritual thing, and it's a social thing. If we transcend these problems within ourselves, we will see the world change, at whatever level of truth you analyze it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You brought up things like childhood traumas and stuff like that. I've just started to realize all this stuff in the last few years, and I've realized about myself. So I've been going down this path of sort of realizing why there's problems in the world, and then realizing it's all inside of me as well, and trying to fix them all. If you asked me a couple of years ago, how was your childhood? I actually remember I had dinner with Stefan Molyneux. Here's an interesting story. I don't know if I've ever told before. It was about 5 years ago. I was in Phoenix or somewhere in the U.S. It was at some sort of conference. I think it might have been a KC research conference, and Stefan Molyneux was there, and I was a big fan because back then he was an anarchist, and he was really smart, and he had all these great ideas and philosophy and all that kind of stuff. And I said, hey, do you want to go for dinner? He said, sure. I was like, oh, that's great. I'm so excited to hang out with you. We hung out. We said, typical Stefan Molyneux style. He's like, so how was your childhood? And I was like, fine. And he was like, well, tell me a bit more. And we got talking. About an hour later, he had me thinking, I wasn't convinced at that point, but he had me thinking, maybe my childhood wasn't great. And then I was like, oh, it's just Stefan Molyneux. He seems to be able to do that with everyone. But what I've realized over the last couple of years is I got more into everything, just trying to heal myself in every single way. And I've just started scratching the surface. It's takes years and years. I've already been doing it for 2 years, and I think I'm just starting now. But what I've just realized in the last month or so is a lot of it stems from my childhood and how I was treated. And I thought everything was fine, but I really never talked to my parents. I basically was left, I almost raised myself. I never saw them. If I saw them, it was usually kind of like my dad telling me to shut up. I got beat up a little bit every now and then, but not too bad. But basically, they weren't ever there. They're working the whole time, which is sort of a thing with the whole way the system's set up as well, is to get both parents out of the house. I'd go off to the government indoctrination camps, the public schools, by myself, get beat up almost every day, come back home, kind of no one's there, kind of just try to deal with it, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm starting to realize that a big part of it is just fixing those sort of things. So this is like deeper problems that, it almost seems unfixable, even in my own life, not to mention in everyone else's life. But I guess we got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I guess these things, they're buried in our unconscious to some extent, and we don't know. Well, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know how much these things affect us. And when we first become conscious of them, they can seem, like you said, this insurmountable obstacles. But we can, in my experience, we can overcome our pain, and we can even transmute our pain and turn it to our advantage.
Well, that's hopeful. I haven't seen that quite yet, although I have had many amazing sort of epiphanies over the last few months or even the last few years, even after the first time I did ayahuasca, the first time I did iboga. I'm not saying it's just psychedelics. I've been doing every possible thing you can imagine, including hypnosis therapy, meditation's been huge, all kinds of things, all kinds of health-related things as well. I've started realizing that if my physical body wasn't quite well, then my mental health was not well. It's all related. And then if you don't have your mental health quite well, then you're never going to even get close to any sort of spiritual sort of awareness or consciousness or anything like that. So it's all tied together. It's been quite a deep, long road that I'm still, just like I said, just starting on. But it has been worthwhile. I wouldn't do it if it hadn't been. But it's something. So for people out there, look into yourself as well. Don't just look at the outside world. And like I said, I think we do recreate our own reality to an extent. I've seen it so many times in my own life. So if you can fix whatever issues you have inside, you might see the outer world all of a sudden just magically change. It's all seems to be related.
Yeah. yeah. Well, yeah, I've taken ayahuasca twice, and it was, especially the first time, it was a phenomenal experience. It was like this big discourse on love, and it was even like ayahuasca had this sort of lesson plan for me. Like I teach English, so it was like ayahuasca was sort of mimicking me, I guess, or it was like, okay, well, I'll present things to you in the way that makes sense to you. And so I had all these little pieces of the puzzle, things about like my ex-girlfriends and my parents and friends that I'd had. And at every stage I would ask, okay, so what's I don't understand why you're showing me this memory, and ayahuasca would reveal this deep truth. And like I remember one, which was I had this memory of my friend doing this awful thing, like this happened like more than 10 years ago, I think. This woman was goading my friend into getting angry, and eventually he did snap. He got angry and he attacked her physically, and it was an awful situation. And of course, it made me uncomfortable. And I said, "Okay, ayahuasca, what's the lesson here? This is kind of a strange memory to bring up." And she said, before it happened, he was your friend. While it happened, he was your friend. After it happened, he was still your friend. And that's the kind of love that exists for you, always. And I believe that. I think Mother Earth loves us. I think God loves us. And, it sounds weird to say it for some people, but that's that's what I think's going on here.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, all this sort of stuff. And you talk about that quite a bit on your show, I know. So I wanted to let people know about it in case they didn't. The Paradise Paradox, definitely check it out. He's always got some interesting conversations going on there that a lot of them even go quite a bit deeper than what we talk about here on Anarchast, which I know is already fairly deep for some people. But, oh, sorry, my ears are too small or too big or something. This earpiece will not fit in correctly. It always seems to happen. One thing you brought up earlier, which I found interesting that I've been kind of waking up to again, is you brought up marijuana versus alcohol. And that's another thing that I've realized over 40 plus years that I've been totally lied to about alcohol, just by society, just by the constant. It's always, in the movies, it's always on the television programming. It's always, the commercials, that stuff all goes into your head. And I drank a lot in my lifetime, and I thought it was just normal, like your friends there. Oh, this is just normal. It's, everyone does it. I found that alcohol's got to be one of the worst drugs out there, especially compared to something like marijuana. So I've done marijuana a few times. I definitely done cannabis oil a few times. I had the most amazing yoga session on cannabis oil a couple of weeks ago. That was actually almost like an ayahuasca experience. So what I've realized is they want to keep things like marijuana out of the hands of people because that will actually open your mind quite a bit. Whereas alcohol, all it really does is it lowers your vibration, gets you into this very sort of dumbed down sort of a state. You can't really think very well. You can't really do much. You kind of feel like fighting a little bit. Some people, they don't mind that at all. And then I looked into it even more recently. This is just very recently, and things like they call it spirits. There's some theories out there about alcohol that really what it does is sort of opens you up to some very negative, some very evil sort of spirits. And I looked into it a bit, and I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. Have you ever thought about that?
No, I don't think I've ever had any experience with. Well, I'm trying to think. Well, actually, there was something, but I don't know if I care to share it here. But it's a bit too weird. Yeah, I wonder if that's possible because when you drink, if you drink excessively, you get blackout drunk and you don't remember what happened.
This is one thing that it said that I looked into just briefly. Yep. It said when you get blackout drunk, it's actually your spirit leaving the body because it's such in a negative, low vibration state that it can't stay there, so it leaves. That's what I heard, and I was like, that actually makes some sense because I've gotten that way, and I turned into a different. That's not me anymore, and I don't even know what that person's doing. So that's pretty crazy. But go ahead.
Yes. Well, that's what I was getting at too. That's actually what I used to believe. When I got blackout drunk, I used to say, "Oh, my soul left last night," or "I was somewhere else." And if your soul does go somewhere else, or your body is a little off, your consciousness obviously isn't fully there because you're not recording memories. What else could be getting into you? I don't know. That's just kind of speculation.
Yeah, it's something to think about, though. So this is all new information to me, and when I heard about it, I was like, this makes a lot of sense. Why haven't I heard these ideas before? Like they could really try to make sure you don't hear these ideas, and just put on your sports games and drink your beer, but marijuana, don't do that. That's really bad. Well, that's what Bill Hicks used to say. He used to say, isn't this just a huge coincidence? How all the drugs which do nothing for you and keep you stupid and unhealthy are legal, and all of the ones which open your mind a little bit and give you this fresh perspective are illegal. Isn't that funny? Yeah, and then he was quickly dead after that, so you got to wonder. He was the one who had the whole thing. Why do all the people who tell us the truth, they quickly die? And he brought up, none of these people I'm going to mention are perfect, but he brought up people like John Lennon and Gandhi and people like that. And then he basically, if you ever look at his last sort of comedy bit thing, it was he ended it with a statement that I still think is one of the best statements about what life is. And he's like, I don't remember the exact thing. I could actually maybe even put it in this video if my video guy finds it, something about life is it's just a ride. It goes up and down, and it's very brightly colored.
Roller coaster ride. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we'll throw that in because it's so beautiful.
The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real, because that's how powerful our minds are. And the ride goes up and down and round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored, and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while. Some people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us, and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because this is just a ride, and we kill those people. Shut him up. We have a lot invested in this ride. Shut him up. Look at my furrows of worry. Look at my big bank account and my family. Has to be real. It's just a ride. But we always kill those good guys who try and tell us that. You ever notice that? And let the demons run amok? But it doesn't matter because it's just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice. No effort, no work, no job, no savings of money. A choice right now between fear and love. The eyes of fear want you to put bigger locks on your door, buy guns, close yourself off. The eyes of love instead see all of us as one. Here's what we can do to change the world right now to a better ride. Take all that money we spend on weapons and defense each year and instead spend it feeding, clothing, and educating the poor of the world, which it would many times over, not one human being excluded, and we can explore space together, both inner and outer, forever.
So yeah, he did that, and then very quickly after that he was dead. You just have to wonder. I've sort of got these ideas that life is sort of this matrix thing, if you kind of tell too many people what's going on, I don't know if you get killed by the bad people or if you just have risen to this level of consciousness that you can't really even exist on this physical level anymore. I think it's one or the other from what I can tell.
Maybe it's a bit of both. Like maybe I like to think about this quote from the movie Jacob's Ladder, and they say it's a quote from Meister Eckhart, but it's not true. But in the movie, the guy says, so you see all these demons everywhere and everything. Actually, they're angels, but the fact that you can't let go of your body makes them appear like demons. So when these angels are separating you from the things that you think are important to take you to this other place, they appear as evil, but they're actually just like these forces of nature. So
that's one thing I've started to realize more and more is everything is not what it seems. and it just gets so confusing to the point you just almost want to give up. But it also is fascinating at the same time, the more you look into this. But most people never even think about this stuff, right? So that's sort of the path I've been on for the last few years, is just thinking about all this stuff. And it's pretty wild. It's like I don't really watch many movies. Like you mentioned Jacob's Ladder or whatever. I've never heard of it. I don't watch many movies because I sit down and I watch them like, this is nothing compared to what's really going on in life. Like this does not compare. Like life is far more interesting than anything they could put on a TV screen. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to tell you. I was writing some notes before the interview, and one thing that I thought was important is just to say, life is wonderful. And I was thinking this morning as I was walking down to the gym, and I started imagining like, what would my experience be like if I was seeing all of these things for the first time and my eyes started to get a little bright and I felt like a child? It's like, if you're a country boy, the first time you go to a city or the first time in a new country, you start looking at all of these things with fascination, and you're like, this is all of these colors and shapes and patterns, everything, everywhere. It's amazing. So I think that experience is available to us all the time, and we can enjoy that. The glory of being, the glory of experiencing things. It's like life is this great. Like Bill Hicks said, it's like this great, it's like a psychedelic trip, and so many amazing things are happening. It's like this bizarre dream, and we're all experiencing it. But everything that you experience is just for you in that moment, and it will never be repeated. And enjoy it.
Yeah, that's one thing I hear quite a bit, that I should do that. I even remember I saw you talk about that on your show, and I should try to do it a little bit. So I walked into the room and I did what you said. I saw a lamp and I called it something. I called it a water bottle. I just called it something else. It didn't work for me because I still can't. I don't know. I don't know if I'm full of. I don't know what's wrong, but I'm still trying to get to the answer, and I want to be like that. I know people like that. I've met them now, and every day to them is just a wonderful adventure. and what I've heard about some things is some people go, well, you got to get rid of fear. That's the issue with most people. I don't think I have much fear. I could be wrong, but like I don't wake up and I feel fearful about anything. I'm not scared of the government. I'm not scared to die. Actually, I look forward to dying because I'm kind of not very happy on most days. But maybe I have some fear. Maybe this is something psychological I have to just get to the root of, because I do want to be like that. That would be wonderful. But it's not easy, if you just, I guess you have to figure it out, It's just one of those things.
Yeah. Well, this is my opinion. I could be completely wrong. I don't think it's necessarily about fear. What I guess is a kind of emotional block. Like you don't want to open up and feel all these all these crazy emotions. Not exactly because of fear, or maybe fear has something to do with it, but it's like this unconscious thing. Like you shut yourself off to these experiences, and someday you probably break through it, and
that makes a lot of sense. I've been told that a lot by shamans. I've been told it by therapists. It's like, you got this huge block, and they always say it's right around my heart.
Right. Well, I had the same thing. Just got to keep working at it, I guess. Yeah, I had a similar thing with my first ayahuasca trip. I remember it was like ayahuasca was knocking on the door, and she kept saying, "Look, listen to me. When people care about you, that's something important." And I was like, "No, it's not that important. It's no big deal." And she tried like 3-4 times, and I remember hearing this little voice saying, "Gee, you're a hard nut to crack, aren't you?" And then eventually it came like just overwhelming, like, "Oh, feel it, feel the love, feel it, it's all around you." And when the message was like with my parents and with my friends and things, that when they do care about you, like, that's not something that happens every day. When someone actually wants to share their life with you, wants to hear what you have to say, that's something special. So that was my experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, you've actually been teaching me a lot here. It got me thinking about what. Yeah. I think I do close off a lot of stuff. I think I am afraid to fully feel. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know this was going to be a psychological therapy session, but thank you for mentioning that. I needed to remember that so I can continue to work on that. But let's get into your life in Mexico there, because you were from Australia. You somehow ended up in Mexico. I see you on Facebook all the time. You seem to be really enjoying it. So what's the whole story behind that?
Yeah, well, the reason I came to Mexico, I guess it's kind of this long series of coincidences. My buddy Aaron Battle, who I used to do the podcast with, now he's kind of taken a step back. I remember we were working together, knocking on doors like 10 years ago or more, and he's Mexican-Australian. And I remember he said to me this thing about how when he meets his white cousins, and this is an oversimplification, but when he meets his white cousins, their attitude is, "What can I take from you? What value can I extract?" But when he meets his brown cousins, they're like, "What can I offer you? How can I help you? What can I do to make your life complete?" And I was moved by that. At that point, I'd never been to Latin America, and when I came like around 2011, I came to I went to Colombia. And I found that it was true. People are so open and hospitable and full of love. It was so, I was taken aback. Like I'd never experienced that level of hospitality before. So I chose, on some level, I chose to have that in my life. And that's one very important reason why I'm here. And yeah, about living in Mexico, of course, no place is perfect. I don't want to give the impression that Mexico is a utopia, but people are definitely more critical of it than they should be, because I see these people telling me that it's a hellhole, that it's dangerous, that it's a war zone even, and they tell me that it's run by cartels and a corrupt government. But what's difficult for some of these people to understand, they still got this authoritarian chip in their head, that nobody really runs Mexico. So these small groups like cartels have a little bit of power. The police, the government, or the politicians have these small pieces of power. But basically, everybody kind of just does what they want. And it is the government has this sort of decentralized power structure. So it's not perfect, but it's kind of better than in these developed nations in a sense, because if you in Australia or Canada, these politicians get together and conspire, they write their little words on a page and they put it out as if it's law, and then people follow it. But here, that's not really what happens. I mean, they can put their words on a page. It doesn't really matter. People aren't going to say, oh, that's the law, I have to do No, they know what's good and they know what's moral most of the time. And that's what they follow. And, even with the police in Australia, if the police know something is the law, then they're going to hit you with the book. But here, if the police know it's the law, they'll say, well, give me 50 pesos and we'll just forget about it. So
yeah, it's kind of funny to hear people, especially anarchists, talking about Mexico like they're scared to go to Mexico because they hear it's dangerous. It's like, I don't think you understand what's going on here. Like, for anarchists, it's great. If what you really like is this really authoritarian, really like, if you break any government law, you're going to end up kidnapped and in a cage, and there's no chance you'll get out. You'll be fighting it for years in courts. If that's what you really like, stay in the U.S., stay in Australia, stay in Canada. If you're more of an anarchist and you think things should just be sort of decentralized and people should make their own decisions, and if you hurt somebody, maybe that person might kill you. That's it's very and that's why a lot of people are very polite, because you can't if you actually do serious damage to someone here, they're not just going to call a phone number and some guys are going to come and they're going to take care of it themselves. So for anarchists, it's actually quite a great place to live. I personally love it. I live in Acapulco, as you know. It's been called for a number of years by the CIA the fourth most dangerous city in the world, and I never feel safer than when I'm in Acapulco, because I know the cops there's no cops, and if there is cops, they're never going to bother me. And I know that the people that people think are super dangerous, which would be mostly cartel people, they have no interest in bothering me. It's like I'm not doing anything to. And if anything, I support their business. Like, oh, you're providing plants to willing voluntary customers. Great. If you need any help from me, you need a website or something. I don't know. Maybe I can teach you about Bitcoin so you can get around the U.S. dollar fiat currency stuff. Great. Yeah. So we're basically friends. It's fine.
Yeah. I remember I had one experience I wanted to mention when a buddy of mine has a lot of relatives in the police force, and we were at this New Year's party, and I met these people before, and one of them stopped me, a police officer, off duty obviously, and he said, hey, I love that stuff you post on Facebook. And I was like, really? What stuff? And he said, well, the stuff about the government. You're right. It's got to go. So, even the cops are anti-authoritarian to some extent.
Yeah, like most of the cops that I've ever sort of run into or met, they almost feel apologetic because they're doing that job, and they're kind of like, I needed to make some money. It's still got this sort of like very anti-government sort of feeling about it all, and that's how most people think about cops. Like, I actually know a number of people here in Acapulco who are local Acapulco people. They're like, if the cops ever do pull you over, which is quite rare, give them like 50 pesos or something. They barely make any money. So it's almost like they're street beggars with guns, basically, and they're kind of nice guys in general. Like, I know a few people who have gotten pulled over and they just took the cop to a local bar and they had a couple beers, and that was his sort of what he had to do to get out of the issue. It's kind of just, I much prefer it to the U.S. where, oh man, if you get pulled over, just cross your fingers and don't make any sudden moves, you might get killed.
Yes. So yeah, well, I do try to remember. Like for years, I had this attitude. Like whenever a cop was around, I was like, oh, who's this, authoritarian asshole or whatever. But I do try to remember, and I think it's easier to remember in Mexico that this person has a life. He probably has a wife and kids or a family that he cares about. He's just a person, just like any one of us. And I see a Mexican policeman, and I remember he's a Mexican first. He probably has that Mexican hospitality. So they do have hearts. They are real people, and I think we do need to treat police like real people, to be more compassionate towards them, so we can show them the error of their ways.
Yeah, it never hurts to treat everyone with compassion, and they all do have their own stories, and a lot of them are just confused. That's what I've found in my whole life. Like I was just up at UC Berkeley with Lauren Southern and Luke Radowski, and they're having the anti-fascist, I guess the Antifa they call themselves, who are incredibly fascist, trying to shut down free speech, and I was kind of watching both sides, and I sided more with the free speech guys. Obviously, there was, I'm obviously for free speech, but some of them were Trumpites and stuff like that. And I was looking at them, and I was like talking to them. I'm like, I see why you think you should support Trump, but you got it wrong. And then you talk to some of the commies; they're really screwed up in the head. But you can kind of see they had this like bad childhood or something, and their dad told them they're worthless and they couldn't make any money, and then they end up in these schools and they're taught this government indoctrination about socialism and capitalism's bad, and they're just doing what they think is best, and it's just all kind of sad to see. But I didn't see anything get solved by them all beating each other up that day. If anything, if they could just sit down and talk to each other, they'd probably come to a lot better understanding. But that's sort of the state of most people today, or a lot of people, is they can't even get to that point of even talking because they're so screwed up through all the indoctrination, all the damage that's been done to them in their lives. But yeah, they are real people. But you live in Guadalajara, which is interesting because I know you were here at Acapulco. I actually like Guadalajara quite a bit. It's one of my favorite cities in Mexico. It's very it's got everything, but it's got a very nice cultured side to it. It's got like wine bar. It's got like museums and ballet and opera and all that kind of stuff. What's your take on Guadalajara for people who are just curious about it?
Yeah, it's a great city. So it's the second biggest city in Mexico, but it doesn't seem like a big city. Like there aren't many skyscrapers or anything like that. So it does seem like it has a kind of small town feel to it. And I lived in Melbourne for about 6 years, and that's like the cultural capital of Australia. And Guadalajara is like the similar sort of thing in Mexico. So there is a lot of like I go down the street on the weekends, and I see people break dancing in the street or rapping, and there's like a clown performing and all this sort of thing. And also, one thing that Guadalajara is famous for is the women. The women are exceptionally beautiful.
Yeah, I do remember that. That's probably why I remember I like Guadalajara so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It's a very, very nice place. So for people out there curious, you're dropping by, let Kurt know if you're ever at Acapulco. We have a whole group of anarchists here as well. I think you're quite close there to Puerto Vallarta, right?
Yep. It's like, they're building a highway. When the highway gets completed, it should be like 2 hours. Now it's like 6 hours by bus. Yeah,
I was looking at the map recently, and I was like, because my wife was like saying, because she just went up there recently, she's like, it'd be nice to kind of live in Guadalajara sometimes. And I was like, yeah, it's close to Puerto Vallarta, and I like Puerto Vallarta as well. And they both got great international airports. So for me, when I travel, it would be so much better in Acapulco sometimes. But I looked on Google Maps, and it's like only 100 kilometers or 150 kilometers from Guadalajara to Puerto Vallarta, but it's like a 6-hour drive. As you said, it must be just up and down and around or something.
Yeah, a lot of hills, a lot of government-built highways.
Yeah, but there's quite a few anarchists there as well. People like another rapper, L. Dixon, who actually is our website guy. He does a lot of our website stuff, and numerous other people.
Great guy.
Yeah, and so lots of people in Mexico for people who are curious. We should wrap this up. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about while I have you on?
No, I think we covered everything. So yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. Thanks again for everything you do for the Liberty movement, and Oh, the other thing I was going to include in my rant was, well, go easy on yourself. Don't be so hard. Like, when nobody comes into this life with a manual or a guidebook. We don't know exactly what we're doing. You know, if we get lucky, we have somebody who's gives us a few little words of advice. But the thing is, we're going to make mistakes, and we make these small mistakes or big mistakes, and these small mistakes which seem like huge mistakes from our perspective. But when we do something right, and it doesn't even have to be completely right, it can just be just a small thing that we do right. It is a miracle. It is amazing, against all odds that we do something good for others. So that's all I wanted to say.
That's great advice, and that's partly why I like your show, because you do talk about a lot of this stuff. So why don't you let people know where they can get more information and listen or watch the Paradise Paradox?
Yep, sure. So check out the website, theparadiseparadox.com, or you can go on Facebook, search for The Paradise Paradox, and YouTube, The Paradise Paradox. You can also check it out on iTunes or your favorite podcasting app. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's great. Check it out. Like I said, it's a great show. I like it. And if you like this, please like, subscribe, share down below. Got to get this information out there to more and more people in many ways. So this episode was great in that we talked a lot about deep stuff as well. And I think that can help a lot of people. And so please just like and subscribe and share. That really helps out. And check out Kurt's show as well if you like this sort of information. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.